So we'll just go ahead and get started. If other students come in, then we will definitely welcome them in. But my name is Karina, and I'm one of the student success coaches here at MCC. We have the other two success coaches here helping us, but we also have Megan Scanlon. So I'll let you kind of just present who you are, Megan.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. Hi to those of you on Zoom. My name is Megan Scanlon. I am the coordinator of student activities here at MCC, so I oversee our student life office.
Perfect. Now I know Bianca just submitted on the chat the Google form, so if you have a chance, make sure to submit that. And then for you all, I believe you just submitted it, so thank you very much. So we will go ahead and get started. So if we go on to the next slide. Perfect. So really our overall presentation focuses on confidence and communication, right? I think one thing that I struggled in as a college student had to have been just the many nuances that you go through when you're communicating with other people. And some ideas that I thought of were like, if you thought you were either being treated unfairly, or maybe at work somehow you felt like you were being a pushover, or there's family dynamics and there's a lot of issues or problems that you don't know necessarily how to deal with them or confront the other person, or even within friends, within those circles, right? So what we're trying to do today is really trying to find a way to help you be more assertive, and helping you find those patterns that you currently deal with and use for your communication, and try to make that a bit more stronger, more assertive. So for my next one, so we do have 4 basic styles of communication. Have either of you ever heard of like passive aggressive, assertive? No? Okay, well, we're just gonna do like a quick overview. How about Zoom? Anybody have either of you heard of either of these terms or any of these terms? Okay. We'll just continue on. So overall, I think we'll go ahead and start with the first one. So passive, right? When we think of passive, we're thinking of avoiding expressing other people's opinions and feelings, or protecting their rights, identifying and meeting their needs. Typically, people that are very passive in communication will allow certain things to bother them or annoyances to continue mounting. And usually you're unaware of that buildup that's occurring in you. You sometimes do end up having an explosive outburst, but right after that outburst, you may either feel some shame, guilt, confusion, and then return back to that being passive piece. Sometimes passive communicators, and this is what was on here, fail to assert for themselves, allow others to deliberately or inadvertently infringe on their rights, fail to express their feelings, need or opinions, tend to speak softly, and then exhibit poor eye contact and slow body posture. So, questions about that one?
Awesome. Our next one is aggressive. So typically individuals who have an aggressive way of communicating have very strong opinions and feelings that they're communicating in a very clear way, but they usually tend to violate the rights of others, right? And so a lot of the times we feel like these type of individuals are really trying to dominate conversations. They tend to speak down to others, really use humiliation. A lot of the times they do a lot of blame, right? They're not the ones who are wrong, it's everyone else who's wrong. And their opinion is the only opinion that matters. And they're not very open-minded, right? They don't listen very well. And they can be really overbearing or intimidating in a lot of those aggressive situations.
Perfect, yeah. And then that leads us to our next one, which is obviously passive aggressive. So I'm just gonna jump on this side because I feel like you guys can probably see me on Zoom better. But for passive aggressive, usually it's very passive on the surface. So everything that you're doing physically are very like subtle. You're acting out in anger and subtle, indirect shots sometimes being taken in behind the scenes, right? So usually, or those types of people usually feel some type of like powerless or stuck or resentful towards something. And you'll often also feel like you know you're using some type of sarcasm. You deny that there actually is a problem. You would rather mutter to yourself rather than confront the actual issue or the person, and even use like subtle sabotage to get even. So.
Our last one is assertive, and I think a lot of the times when we think of the word assertive, we kind of think of it in a negative connotation, but really when it comes to communication, assertive is the way we want to be, right? That is when, as a communicator, we are able to express our ideas and opinions very clearly, while also being respective of others that we're communicating with. And so assertive is going to be our ultimate goal when it comes to being effective communicators, right? We're very relaxed in our body posture. We're able to use I statements in the way that we're talking. We clearly express our feelings and our opinions. We listen well without interrupting, right? So we're allowing people to share their thoughts and feelings. And we're able to not only stand up for our rights, but we're able to support others, whether we agree with them or not. So assertive is really going to be our main goal when it comes to communication.
Yeah, and so I just wanted to show a quick clip of some examples that are everything but assertive, right? Have either of you watched Schitt's Creek? It is a funny show.
Do you want me to get mine first in front of you? And then what would you do? Would you just run away and leave it out on the floor?
Sort of, that was the plan, yeah.
Also, you have a big thing of dandruff on your head though?
Don't do that. How many people do you know that are currently in the prison system? Is it like
I'm pretty sure
12?
just 2. How long are we gonna be talking about you for?
I think I'm having a heart attack.
Well, I'm gonna go for a jog, so don't die until I get back.
Well, how long are you going for?
I don't really know how long are you gonna be like this for?
Don't be a little bee.
Why is it dark? There's a witch's house in here, David.
Shush.
But it's my turn to take a selfish.
No,
Yes,
David,
yes.
you selfish last time.
Get out of it.
Ouch, David. Ouch, David.
Shut the curtains. It's all about aging and dry skin.
Oh my God, ew, David. Take it you haven't heard from David. Okay, yeah, fine. And David's missing. I'm sorry for not responding to like one text, David. So I was eating my yogurt. Yay! Okay, so look at my camera.
Oh, did you pick up that random condom that was on the grass?
Ew, yeah, whose was that? Yeah, okay. Oh, there's the condom right there.
Ew.
Ew.
What? The audio is chopped. We'll share the video. Okay, we'll share the presentation.
Okay.
Oh, David, I have nowhere else to put stuff.
Happy birthday, David.
Happy graduation, Alexis. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe we could do manicures.
I could do a manicure. The 3 of us should go.
Yes. Oh, yay, David. Yay.
Something wrong?
People aren't thinking about you.
Okay, so we'll actually just stop it there, but just by taking a look at like the way like David and Alexis's relationship are, you can tell that they're very like passive aggressive when they talk to each other and just how they work amongst each other, but we try to avoid those, right? Maybe sometimes with family that is definitely okay, but when it comes to either like a workplace setting or even just when you're communicating with friends, that's definitely not the type of a relationship you would necessarily want to hold. So I think of like this overall like arcing thing of aggressive, assertive, passive, and passive aggressive. And trying to really find that balance. So of either not having enough consideration for yourself or not having enough consideration for others, really trying to find like that medium or balance between yourself, to be able to feel more assertive, right? And both being able to feel more open in communication, but then also considering other people's feelings along with your own. So yeah, and so that goes into the next piece, which is really the power of I statements. Okay, yeah, and so for the I statements, a few things that I'll mention. When you want to say something but you don't know what will help, usually the I statement is what you would want to do, right? And the reason for that is because I statements usually will help the situation. It's not going to fix the situation, but it's going to help others understand how you're coping with things or understanding your feelings. That doesn't necessarily mean that your I statements are going to be, if you expect it to be the same answer and fix what's not working straight away, you might have an unrealistic expectation. Or if you expect the person to respond as you want them to immediately, you may also have a specific or unrealistic expectation. And I think that top one is really the most important one, where it says your I statement isn't about being polite. You're still expressing your feelings. If you are upset or angry, you are allowed to feel like that, but it's a matter of expressing that on how you're feeling and not what the other person has shared or done. So that really is one of the main pieces. Do you want to go into the next slide? So the next part is like, what can you realistically expect, right? When you use the I statement with the good intentions, typically. You are likely to use highly unlikely to do any harm really to the other person. So you're being open-minded and also trying to be mindful of how they're feeling. But again, you're still reiterating how you feel through that process. It's going to be a step in the right direction. You are sure to change the current situation in some way, in a positive way, I would say, at least, because you know that if you're using an I statement, it's a bit more safe than you saying you, right? And it will open up the possibilities, hopefully, to be able to communicate and get to a better understanding amongst you two. So we try to use I statements when we need to confront others about their behavior, when we feel others are not treating us right, or when we feel defensive or angry, or when others are angry with us, right? So some examples would be like, when you're, because there's like 5 steps, and we'll hold off on this part, but what I'm here, you may want to just advocate and understand, let the other person know that you are listening to them. So what I'm hearing is, or nodding of the head, some of those like common body language movements that show like, this is what you are doing to show that I am interested or engaged in the conversation that we're having. Again, using that I and not you. So some leader sentences, or some ways to kind of start off the sentences with that is when I'm, or when I, or I think that I, or I feel that I, or my concern is, but you also wanna be mindful to refer to the behavior and not necessarily the person. So when I'm shouted at, or let's say when I'm sworn at or pushed around at, or the towels are left on the floor. And then you also want to make sure that you're stating how a behavior affects you, right? So my concern is that I get really anxious, that I get scared, that I get hurt, and you try to explain what that is. And then say what happened, like what scenario or did you go through that is making you feel like that.
So now what we're gonna do is we are going to get you guys moving and grooving. And for those of you on Zoom, I'll go through this and we'll have you participate as well. So we have a couple scenarios that we are going to go through, and we want those of you in the room and on Zoom to decide how you specifically would react in that situation. So again, we have our passive aggressive. So that is a style in which individuals appear passive on the surface, but are really acting out of anger in a very subtle, indirect way, right? We have our aggressive, which is our a style in which we're expressing our feelings and our opinions while also being respectful of others. We have our assertive, so we're being very assertive in the way we're expressing our feelings and opinions firmly without violating the rights of others. And then passive, just avoiding or expressing our feelings kind of altogether. So we're going to go through each scenario. For those of you in the room, if you want to move towards the Post-it note on the board that best describes your you in that situation. And then for those of you on Zoom, if you want to just type in your word in the chat.
And Bianca, if you don't mind putting the key that I provided there so they don't have to type out the whole word.
All right. So our first scenario is your friend offers to give you a ride to a job interview, but is half an hour late and you miss your interview. So your friend offers to give you a ride to your job interview, is a half an hour late and you miss the interview. How do you react in that situation? Yeah, you can stand. Those of you in the room can stand up and move to that. Those of you on Zoom, if you want to just type your type that in the chat.
So you can stand on the one that you relate most to.
Perfect. Thank you, Veronica. Awesome. Perfect. Perfect. Are we all, how are we over here? All aggressive? All under aggressive? Okay. So we have those in the room, all under the aggressive category. Those on Zoom are tending to be a little bit more
Is it PA, passive aggressive?
okay, we're gonna, so for those of you on Zoom, passive aggressive is PA and passive is just gonna be P. So I'm assuming you're all passive aggressive in this situation. Perfect. Does anyone want to maybe elaborate maybe what they would say or what they would do in that situation?
For me, it depends on who it is. Like if it's my sister, obviously it's a friend, but like if it's my sister, I'd be a little more like harsher with her just because I'm closer with her. And so I'd probably be like, why, you know? But if it's like a friend, I think I'd be more sad than mad. And so I'd probably just be like, it's fine, and then like not talk to them for a while. So
Yeah.
I'd be angry with them. I feel like all my friends are like closer friends, not just acquaintances. So I feel like it's almost personally against me because they said that they would help out and then they didn't. Then that affected me negatively.
Great.
I think I would be upset. And I kind of would probably want to know, I guess I would switch it to them, that if I offered that to you and I didn't show up, how would that make you feel? And, so they can kind of feel how I'm feeling and maybe also be like, why was there no communication?
Yeah.
And so I love everything that I'm hearing. I think that like for this scenario, a lot of these scenarios, you're a lot, like I said in the previous slides, like you are allowed and entitled to feel angry. Like that is okay, but it's just learning to express how is something that we have to try and like turn around or move to be assertive, but also show like this is what's bothering me and how can we fix this? You know what I mean? So like I said, going back to like that I statement, So if, for example, what would be like an idea that you would throw out there using that I statement, like, this is how I feel about the scenario, how would you change it up?
Feel as if you were thoughtless. But I said you. So I feel that, gosh, that's hard.
What about the behavior bothered you?
Oh,
Like
I
I would,
think, yeah, go ahead.
I would say, I feel betrayed. Like, I was expecting you here on time.
Yeah, and that's like, that is perfect, like, I think that is a great example of an I statement, you're still expressing what is bothering you, and I think even going a little bit further is, you know, I felt this way, I feel angry about the scenario because I was expecting my friend to be here, and this was something important for me, and really giving them more of a context as to why it is that it makes you so upset, like, what from that, yes, they are here late, but why could this be like a make it or break it for you? You know, you're still talking about yourself and how that affected you personally. Okay, so let's go into that second one.
Thank you for sharing, Veronica. I see your stuff in the chat. Good job.
Perfect. So we'll go into the second one, and I'll go ahead and read it. The person who lives in the next room is playing their stereo loud enough that you can't study. Where would you go? Passive, assertive, aggressive?
Did you guys on Zoom get that? The person who lives next door to you is playing their stereo loud enough that you can't study. All right, bang on the wall. Aggressive, perfect, assertive, awesome. Are we a mixture
No.
over here?
I'm assertive.
I'm assertive.
Assertive, passive, we've got a couple assertives in the chat as well. Thoughts on that?
I guess I'll explain mine first. Is I've invested in your employee, which you're young, and I've dealt with people where if they have their music loud, they don't care what you say. They're just going to keep learning.
So you would kind of just let it be, not even worry about addressing it?
I can only pick what I can control, and I can't control myself.
Yeah, definitely.
Anything, ladies?
Well, I would just try to approach it and say, would you mind, I'm trying to study, would you mind if you could lower the volume at least for maybe a period of time?
Yeah, I think that's great, kind of expressing how you feel, but also offering a solution, right? Like, oh, I only have like 15 more minutes of studying left. Then I'm, you can go the rest of the day, kind of a deal.
Do we want to read that?
Yeah, so assuming that are a decent human who wouldn't get angry, I would ask them to turn it down. Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect, okay, so we'll go ahead into the third one. Any questions about that? I feel like this one was like totally fair. I also agree with the fact that you said in some sort of way, like, yes, you can only control what you can control, right? However, I do think that it's beneficial that you at least point out what the other person is doing, because it's that part of like still being assertive, right? You want to be mindful that you are also letting others know how it's affecting you, so that they're mindful that there are other people in this world. You know what I mean? So, yeah, but definitely a thought. So we'll go ahead and go into the third scenario.
All right, scenario number 3. You are in line at the movies and some people cut in line in front of you. So you're in line at the movies and some people cut in line in front of you. Are we passive? Are we assertive? Are we aggressive? Are we passive aggressive?
Yep, wherever you think.
All right, so we're kind of mixed in here. Those of you on Zoom. Passive, okay. Passive aggressive, all right. Okay, yeah, if they're teenagers, one way, and if they're elderly, a different way. I don't think I'd care enough to say anything, exactly. Other thoughts? Thoughts in the room? We've got good thoughts on Zoom.
I think I would, I mean, you never know what the other person's thinking or what they're doing or what, so they may have thought that may have been, they weren't cutting in front of us, and so I kind of probably would pose a question that
Yeah, like
in
why are you
line.
cutting in line? Like ask them, questions.
And if they are, just be like, the line's over there,
Yeah.
we're all in line here.
Yeah.
I mean, it's happened to me, and usually that's, if you present it to them in a nicer way, they kind of are a little bit more responsive, nicer.
Yeah.
And being already an assumption.
But there are times there's people who don't know like when they are cutting in line, and then they're just like, oh, sorry about that. I didn't realize I was cutting in line.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think when we look at, when we think of all the situations, and this one specifically makes me think, what are the things I say in my head versus what do I actually say out loud, right? So in my head, I might be I want to be very assertive, but in reality, I might be very passive and not say anything or do anything, right? And so it's very situational, right? In different situations, we're going to react different ways, and we're going to communicate our feelings in a variety of different ways. We just need to figure out what is the most effective depending on who our audience is versus the scenario.
Yeah, perfect.
Scenario 4, you have a new partner who you really like, but you don't really like the way they kiss.
Oh my gosh.
Oh,
Be aggressive.
Yeah. We'll wait for the Zoomers to come on in.
Like, no.
You have a new partner who you really like, but you don't really like the way they kiss. Perfect. Assertives, which is great. Assertive.
Honest.
Yeah, so what do we do? What do we do in this situation? How do we handle that?
Don't just like keep quiet, like, just tell them, how you feeling, what they do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cause I feel like if you're in a relationship, you shouldn't really feel the need to be passive, cause I don't know, cause you should be able to feel like what Barb was saying, you should just be able to feel like you can say whatever. Especially if it's one of those things, it's kind of like it should be a moment that you enjoy, not really like, ugh, like if you find a new partner, then they need to like understand you, like what's the point of a partner if they don't understand you? Yeah.
Kiss more so they learn how to kiss better, yeah. Yeah, bring it up in a way that's not humiliating, right? So how do, in a situation like that, as Jaden was saying, when you're in a relationship, you want to have this open communication, right? You should be comfortable communicating with each other, whether it's positive things or things that you need to work on. And so I don't have the answer to this, but how do we do that in a way that's comfortable for both parties? Yeah, definitely. Any other thoughts? All right. Moving on to scenario number 5. You get a C on an essay, but you think you deserved a B. So you get a C on an essay, but you think you deserved a B.
It can go in either way,
Perfect. Some assertives, some passives, right? All right, so in our passive arena, what do we do with that situation? How do we handle that? Or how would you handle that?
Ask the teacher, like, what points you missed, you know, like, you think you deserve a B, but they gave you a C, but you just need to ask questions, like, what did I do wrong? So the teacher will explain it to you.
Okay, so far, how is that an example of passive? Do you think that would be in a different category?
I mean, passive could be like, you don't want to say anything.
Exactly,
Yeah.
but yeah, so you would be in the assertive category, yeah.
Yeah, it could be, it could work either way.
Yeah, with between B and C, to me, that's just I trust the judgment, like, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Right.
Trust our judgment, yeah.
I have issues advocating for myself,
Mhm.
so, I probably would be very, aggressive within my own mind,
Yeah.
and I more than likely would not question them.
Mhm.
I probably would go to my peers more so to see where I was, you know, why I felt I deserved that
Mhm.
compared to what maybe someone else got, to see like maybe I didn't deserve that. So,
Passive aggressive.
yeah, well, I don't know, I mean, because I really don't, I wouldn't even, I would not.
I think you're more
I wouldn't even
internally
take-
aggressive
yeah,
and externally passive, yeah.
I wouldn't even go to the professor and ask.
Yeah, no, I think you make a really good point, right? Is how comfortable are we advocating for ourselves? And I think, you know, as we are like, you know, mid-pandemic, where a lot of the things that we're doing are virtual or online, or a lot of the communication we're doing is electronically, or even really not at all. If we're not in these social interactions, how are we becoming more comfortable in standing up for ourselves or advocating for, you know, what we think is right? And so I think for us as staff, that's one of the things we really try to instill in all of you is how do we help you become more comfortable in doing that, right? And so I think all of us, you know, have situations in where we aren't comfortable advocating for ourselves. And so I think that's a natural kind of human response in situations. And so how can we notice when we're doing that, and how can we alleviate that pressure on ourselves to do that?
And I'll add on to that, Megan. I feel like when these scenarios come up, and I do see them come up quite frequently within not student versus faculty, but like a scenario happens and it's not necessarily what you feel is correct. That's one of those times that, yeah, you do have to speak up, right? You don't necessarily have to say like, why did I get a B instead of a C? Or why did I get a C instead of a B? But a good talking point then can really be, okay, what are some areas of improvement that you think that you are suggesting that I could make so that on my next essay, I can change some of those things. It's really just about getting some of those tips, right? And I think one of the biggest fears, because I had this during my undergrad, was you get nervous, you get so caught up in the idea that talking to faculty like might make it or break it. What if they give you a worse score than what you initially had? Or what if you're on your next exam, now they don't like you and now you're feeling some sort of way? But it's trying to remove some of that, like those feelings, and being less afraid or less, so you won't feel like they are as intimidating, but remember they're people too, you know? So most of them will try to communicate with you and like try to find a balance in there. So yeah. Oh yes, okay, duh, okay. It's number 6. Your parents decide they won't want to help pay your tuition next semester because they are going on a cruise.
You're going on a cruise, then you gotta waste all their money on the freaking time.
Passive aggressive, are we aggressive, are we assertive?
Ooh, I didn't
Are
see
we
that.
passive? I'm the same.
I was not doing that.
All right.
We got a good mixture in person. Online, we have passive aggressive, aggressive, assertive, have a mixture. Yeah, so what, like, what would you say? What would be like? Anyone?
I'd probably say some snarky, because like I'm a very sarcastic person, and so that's kind of why I say passive aggressive, like I would like, I don't pay enough money for a cruise, but not my college, but I'm like, that's probably what I was saying, you know, one of those things. And it's kind of like, for me, I guess it's like, I shouldn't expect them to pay, because like I'm a college student, obviously, so it's like, I should be able to, but it's like, if they made an agreement like they did for me, like, we're gonna cover it for your MCC, then I kind of like, hey, yo, pump the brakes, like, let's go back to what you said, you know, one of those kind of things, so it's not gonna be like yelling and screaming, but it would be those little passive, like, you know.
I could like have fun, but with an eye roll kind of deal.
Exactly.
What about assertive? What would you do in this case?
Well, I tell them I'll have a good crew with all that, cause like, not like jokingly, but like, because they have never been on a cruise and they already are playing the base my tradition, so I wouldn't be surprised. I'd be surprised at the take on cruise.
Yeah. And I love this one because I think that different life circumstances cause us to have or express in different scenarios, right? Or like the passive aggressive versus passive, like if you are the one paying your tuition, like in that case, you know that like whether your parents pay or not, it won't matter. And so I think this is one of those, and just like all of them, there's situations that may be different for all, so yeah.
All right, we're down for our last two. Rick, you can read something.
So you are in a restaurant and your food is not hot enough.
Okay, how would not have it?
Like, say you like your pizza steaming and it comes out cold.
Oh, cold pizza.
Obviously.
I did that.
You're not burning your taste buds like you should be.
And then on Zoom, we have passive aggressive and, oh, that was for the last one. So just passive. Just passive. Anything you want to add to this, Megan?
I would say, so, in a situation like this, what are some nonverbal things that could happen if we're being assertive or passive aggressive or aggressive in this situation?
You mean as far as body language or?
Yeah.
Oh, nonverbal. Nonverbal? Like,
One thing I think about is the tip, right? We might reflect that in the server's tip. And so we have to remember that a lot of the times when we think of the way we're communicating, we automatically think of verbal communication, but it can also be seen in nonverbal communication, right? You know, we'll talk about that in the next example, but for this example, right, how are we reflecting that in our tip? How are we then, you know, are we making eye contact with the server now or are we not, right? And so it's this kind of all-encompassing communication in terms of verbal communication and nonverbal communication.
It's funny because this situation actually just happened to me this past weekend. So I had ordered a margarita and it was like way too sweet, like too sweet to the point where I'm like, I can't drink this. It's just syrup at this point. So I felt really bad because I'm normally not the type of person, especially at a restaurant, to be like, oh, you know, I need to change this out. But she was so sweet, and I'm like I took one sip. I'm like, and it was just so sweet for me. I'm like, I know that I would probably crash in an hour if I took this. And she just took it back and topped it off of my bill. But it was like, I was just gonna leave it there, and that would have been a waste of money for me, and then like that would have reflected on how I tipped her too, so I'm like, the fact that she even did that, I ended up tipping her more.
Right, yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so it's just like being comfortable in those situations, right? As Carson says, if they come over and ask how the food is, being comfortable enough to say exactly how you feel, right? If something doesn't taste how you expected it to, or if it wasn't warm enough, or whatever that might be. A lot of the times, I know for me personally, I just say, oh, it's great, regardless on whether I think it's great or not. And so being able in those, I mean, those are very minute situations, but those are good ways to practice like advocating for how we're feeling. And so perfect examples.
Like, even if they leave, you can always like go back to them and say that, oh no, my soup is like cold, can you please reheat it? Or something, yeah.
And so I just like pop that love and love them longer.
Right,
Yeah, that's like.
Perfect.
Awesome. So up down to the last one. Megan, do you want to read it off?
Yeah, all right, so our last scenario. Your instructor has not responded to an email you sent 2 days ago.
I mean, it depends how important it is, you know?
So your instructor hasn't responded to an email that you sent 2 days ago.
Is anybody saying anything via Zoom?
Zoomers, will wait for your responses.
Friday night, why have we got back?
Thoughts in the room?
I've had this happen
Yeah,
to me.
how did you
My
answer?
assertiveness, I was searching for another email, because maybe the email that I had, for some reason, they just aren't responding, they don't open it, so I had to do another email, and so my assertiveness would be like to kind of copy my original email with the new email to kind of show proof that I've been trying to reach out to and you haven't, you know, maybe put an understanding that maybe you're busy, but this is the situation I need to get your attention. So that's kind of probably, that was how I would have handled it, being very assertive for myself on that, and also being understanding that maybe something has happened on their end.
Yeah. Anyone over here? Passive aggressive way?
This happened to me last week. I was trying to like submit things to the airport academy, and so I needed something from one of my teachers, and I was getting like super stressed out. After I sent, I sent it and I had like a good waiting period because I know I should teachers. But then once I got all the other teachers, I was like, all right, so they have time, she has time. So I was like, well, just so they know the email, like, hey, I already sent you. I feel like that's more of a sort of where like you state why you're emailing them, and like, hey, can you go check? I was like, no, I'm not gonna do that, so I just resent the email. I was like, maybe you should just think that like getting it the first time and now here. So like it was like my backdoor way of like actually, I mean, I got it back, so it worked, but
Worked, yeah.
yeah.
Good. Yeah, it depends on how important it is, definitely.
Yeah, because.
Right. Perfect. All right. That was that, so you can take your seats.
Yeah, so, I think, we all did great. Now, I feel like there's different scenarios sometimes that we all go through, but is there anybody else that wants to really share out an experience that they're like, I don't know necessarily how to cope with this. So I kind of want to open it up to the room to see if there's anything else that maybe you're really like, because I thought that this presentation and overall could be like a time where you open up yourself too and say, like, I don't necessarily know how to work through this one. How can I, like, what are some tips and things like that? So does anybody have anything that they are like, what should I do in this scenario? Either via Zoom or in person. It's okay, open the bag of chips first. Doesn't look like it. Yes!
Nita, like, like other students, like acquaintances and all that, like, I'm very like passive when I feel. Like, I feel like I always have bad first introduction.
Okay,
And so maybe some suggestions there would
can you
be,
repeat it, Phil? You repeat it for the Zoom.
I'm just
yeah,
very passive in my introduction, so.
so what he mentioned is something like being very passive when you're meeting a new person, right? Or people around you, like what would you do? What are some suggestions in the room that you would provide then? Right? Because I definitely would say, like, in a scenario like that, and it happens quite frequently, right? I think even in my case too, like, sometimes you are out and about and you're out with friends, but maybe they moved somewhere, they went to the bathroom and now you're there for a few minutes. Like, what do you do in those scenarios? Well, you definitely wanna just, if you see people and you feel like you're connecting or there's something that you find a connection with, start off with that maybe. It also depends just on the scenario, like, is it here at MCC? If it's at MCC, have you tried joining an organization? Or, yeah, I feel like even with events too, there's so many people that come in and aren't necessarily with others, but are more than open to want to hear like other experiences and get to know people. Yeah. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, and I think situations like this, right, where you came, like doing workshops like this, right, you're getting to like all of you are engaging with one another, or just those engagement opportunities, like whether or not it's within student organizations or it's just within events or volunteering. That's a really great way to put some faces to names, right? It makes you a little bit more comfortable on campus. And then when you create those connections, right, when you see those people in the hallway, then you're a little bit more comfortable saying hi to them and building up those relationships. But it is difficult, definitely.
Yeah, so thank you.
Good question.
What about when you're dealing with somebody that is one of these communications? How like passive aggressive? And you know, you could then turn aggressive. How do you handle someone that's passive aggressive towards you?
So from my own experience, I will say that a lot of times I have to take a step back and say I have to like push out of this conversation. Usually with my partner, for example, I usually have to like push out of the conversation and say like, I will be back in 5 minutes. Now, I think that in some circumstances that doesn't necessarily always work, but that is definitely like one way that I try to cope through with that. I think that like if I'm with friends and stuff, I tend to be a little bit more on the passive side, and I usually will not say like what to do with that.
Yeah, I think one thing to remember is in all situations, our kind of main goal is being assertive, and that's not in a negative way, it's in a very positive way. So for example, I'll give our welcome center is a great example of this. Jess up there at the front is answering a ton of phone calls. And a lot of those phone calls are very, very angry people. And so one thing that she said the other day, which I didn't even think about, this is the way to handle myself, really taught me. She had a person on the phone who was just like yelling at her, right? For no reason that she didn't do anything, right? They were just upset with something that was happening. And he just kept yelling and yelling and yelling. And she was very calm, but assertive in that situation, saying, "Sir, I'd love to help you. You need to stop yelling at me." But then he kept yelling at her. And then she was like, "Sir, if you keep yelling at me, I'm gonna hang up on, like, I'm gonna end the phone call." He keeps yelling. She said that again, like, letting him know, like, if you're gonna continue acting the way you're acting, I'm gonna end this conversation, right? And so eventually she had to hang up on him because he just kept going, right? But finding ways for us in those situations to be assertive in a very respectful way. Some people are gonna be very adapt to that, and you know, he might stop yelling and then she's able to help him. But sometimes people just wander plow through the moment because they don't actually need help, they just need somebody to yell at, and then there's really nothing we can do. And so in the situation, what are some situations where we can be helpful to others versus what are other situations where the best thing to do is just to back down because there's nothing we can do to alleviate that
I
situation.
love how you put that, Megan, because the first thing that I think of is like knowing your boundaries. So if you know what comfort that is for you, then you'll know like, okay, like, I'm sorry, but I can't take anymore. And I have, like, that's where, I think that's where for me, like, it's like, I need to take a step back. So, yeah, it's a good one. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Any other questions, final thoughts, anyone on Zoom?
I was gonna say, like, I would say during the whole mask mandate earlier on, when I worked in like the restaurant business and I was the one like at the front, I was called the front lines, having to ask people to put on their mask.
Yeah.
I would say that that's what I developed my communication style, because I feel like you're taught to like approach them, you know, just like not passive, but kind of assertive, just like, hey, we don't remind you to put on your mask. I'm like, whether you hated it or not, it was just kind of the rule, you know? And then it was, you know, depending on how they reacted was where you could like diverge from the assertive to like either, I would tend to go passive. That's kind of how I wanted to start. I don't like confrontations and people please me, which is like, oh, let them do what they want. Like, they're gonna go sit down and eat anyway, they're gonna go stuff their face with food. It was kind of like, no, you need to enforce the rules, whether you like it or not. And so that's kind of where I've like grown in that. It's kind of scary. Like, I had one guy who kind of like phone calls just yelling at me and like call me names and stuff. And I was like, I don't like, I'm 17 years old and I don't want to do this either. So
Yeah.
But then that's kind of where, like you said, take a step back and just like, we just called the manager and it was like, all right, bud, put it on and get out, was kind of the thing. And it's like, you gotta kind of figure out your boundaries. So I like, yep, so like figuring out your boundaries.
Well, that's all that we have for you all. We appreciate you being here. I believe there was supposed to be a raffle. What I will be doing is, everyone should have scanned in for attendance or submitted it through the Google form. So we'll be choosing someone and we will be contacting you via email. So just make sure you're on the lookout for that. Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.